just wasn't meant to be. South Carolina falls in the first round of the NCAA Tournament to Oregon 87-73, ending their magical season, which tied a program record for wins with 26. He's Intern Joe. I'm Mike Yuba, live in Pittsburgh, where South Carolina fell not too long ago to those Ducks. And, man, what more can you really say? Jermaine Couisnard has the game of his life, career high, 40 points against his former team. In South Carolina, especially in that first half, from an offensive standpoint, going just over 7 minutes without a field goal, to me, Joe, that was the difference in this game. Just not being able to score and keep up with the Ducks' offense. And offensively, you knew from just the height advantage that the Ducks had the advantage if they wanted to go into the paint. And that's what they did. That's what they did to you. Dante finished with 23 points. Him and Couisnard combined for 63 of the Ducks' 87 points. And it really was a two-man show today for Oregon.
Yeah, Mike, I mean, Couisnard had the game of his life, right? Finishing with 40, like you mentioned, 14 of 22, 7 of 7 from the line. Really good, and you just can't keep up with it, right? I mean, South Carolina, they tried to chase that lead there. But they weren't able to. I think the offense, they were trying to be a little too fluid when they needed to put on the, put their foot on the gas, right, and kind of chase that lead. But it was too little, too late. You were outmatched in the post. Even when you had CMB and Josh Gray in there were still no match when you tried to bang it inside there. And then, you couldn't really find the one more. Oregon did a great job of just getting in the passing lanes, Mike. So South Carolina, when they would drive it in, right, you can't get a kick. And then you can't move the ball like you want to, and which is why I think they stayed in that kind of fluid offense so long, right? Because that's what you want. You want to drive the kick and then the one more pass for a wide open three, but you couldn't find it. Or again, credit to Oregon, did well on defense. And that was kind of the game plan for South Carolina, right? If you wanted to win this game, be long in the post and then, be able to get in passing lanes, have your defense force turnovers, and then, the shooting will take care of itself. And, Oregon just was the better team today.
I think the thing to me that's frustrating, there's a lot of things you can be frustrated about with this game. What's frustrating to me about South Carolina and what they did in the first half defensively, they were forcing turnovers left and right. The first couple minutes, I think Couisnard had 3 turnovers by himself. Oregon as a team had about 6 in the first couple minutes. And yet South Carolina, they weren't able to do anything with it. It was a slow game, both teams early on. But offensively, again, that was the turning point, not being able to find a basket for about 7 minutes. And at that point, Oregon was just continuing able to put points up. We obviously saw the big half court or 3/4 of the length of the court shot by Cooper right before half to make the score look a little bit better. But even the final score, this was a game that was even uglier than I felt like what the final score was, simply because Oregon could have continued just to put up points. They were doing it all day. South Carolina just did not have an answer. Certainly going down into the paint with Dante, he was taking the game over. But then Couisnard was doing everything, inside, outside. You see the stats right there. He was phenomenal. 14 of 22 from the field. Had 5 threes. He was feeling it. And we've seen this in the past. You go back to his days when he was a Gamecock. Couisnard sometimes would have those slow starts. But once he was able to get into a rhythm, he takes the game over. And he's done that multiple times since coming over to Oregon. At a game earlier this year, he put up 39 points. That was his career high until what he did today. It was just, again, everything that could have gone wrong for South Carolina went wrong. And Couisnard had the game of his life on the other side of things.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. And, you look at CMB and Frederick's comment here, was Oregon was too athletic. Yeah, absolutely. And, CMB, that's a tough game, right, to have in your first NCAA tournament game, one where you kind of feel like you're drowning almost when you have 2 guys that are that big, just doubling you in the post, right? You can't get anything to go. There's no space. Can't really get to the rack and finish. And so, it makes it really tough on a true freshman, right? We saw the guard play. Michi and Talon were both pretty good. The shooting wasn't quite there, but when it came to the post, right, and obviously it's the NCAA tournament, you need to have, success in every area of the basketball court. But South Carolina, the one area where they really couldn't get it going is in the post. And then Oregon, they use that to their advantage, right? Because when you get a turnover in the post, you just get it out to your guards and you start running. And so it's just unfortunate that's how it went. CMB's obviously, he'll take this. He'll come back next year and use this, right? I think it's really, really good experience for these guys. And also, too, I mean, they were playing with house money, too. I mean, I think it needs to be said, and that's a big theme of this season, right? Nobody expected them to be this good. And this is the start of the foundation, the success that you had, the 26 wins. It's pretty legit, right? So it's the foundation. You have guys coming back, and the seniors, obviously you thank them for their service, and, they're going to be really, really good ambassadors of this program going forward.
Yeah, looking at some of the other stats, too, we've talked about it even heading into this game specifically. If South Carolina wanted to have an opportunity to win this game, Meechie Johnson would need to find his shot. Yes, there's been games. You can even go back to the SEC tournament against Arkansas, and South Carolina was still able to win handedly, despite the fact of Meechie not getting shots to drop. But at this point of the year, they're like, hey, Meechie needs to be able to find his shot. And he found his shot today, 24 points, 9 of 16 from the floor. The issue was everyone else. And I'm not saying it was just, we saw Cooper with a 15, but I'm talking about the guys that we've been seeing step up, especially late in the year. I know a couple people have mentioned it. CMB, he obviously had a phenomenal freshman campaign, phenomenal stretch heading into the NCAA tournament. It wasn't his day offensively. And I don't know what it is. I mean, it's real easy for me to sit here and be like, well, he was a freshman, the lights and this and that. I don't think that was the case. I mean, these kids play televised games every friggin' night. I mean, I don't think that was the case. I think what it was is you had a really experienced big down there, and it wasn't just CMB.
Well, I'm talking about you do feel like you're drowning when you're in the post, right? You've got the two bigs like that. I wasn't trying to say that the lights were too big by any means.
No, I'm bringing that up. I'm saying that when you look at a situation like this, a lot of people will say, okay, he's a freshman. Maybe the moment was just too big. I don't think that was the case. I think more than anything, it was just the fact that they went up against a very experienced big, and South Carolina has really struggled on both ends of the court when they've gone up against athletic bigs. I mean, you look at what Auburn did, not exactly apples to apples, a little bit more physical of a team. But Oregon, I'll tell you what, I wasn't expecting them to play defensively the way they did. They looked pretty physical, and especially in the second half. And you could see South Carolina, they would take it in the paint, and then they'd look back and they just try to kick it out because they were afraid to shoot on over Dante. I mean, he's a monster. He's a monster.
Yeah. No, absolutely, Mike. I agree. And I apologize for interrupting there. But yeah, Bird2Fly asked, CMB for certain coming back next year, though. People are saying he's on draft boards already. I believe I have every, certain to believe, that he is coming back. Jordan K from the state who reported it, confirmed with multiple other sources other than Colin, just kind of around his camp. So yeah, I have full reason to believe that
Colin
he is coming back.
Colin told the state that he'll be back next year.
Yeah.
That was a report.
Absolutely. That's huge, right?
Yep. But what this team's going to need, no question. I mean, you're going to be losing some players. We'll have plenty of time this offseason to get into the ins and outs of what South Carolina is going to need after losing some of these players. But you think of being able to bring someone in that, from a big standpoint, so that if you do go up against the Auburns of the world, if you go up against some of these teams like Oregon that do have some of these bigs, that you're able to match up with them. I mean, really, when we go back and we look at some of the losses South Carolina has had this season, you think of those two losses to Auburn. You think of the loss, obviously, today against Oregon. They really struggled when they went up against athletic bigs. And they had talent. They had talent in the paint this year. But what they needed in order to be able to stop those teams, they just didn't have. I mean, BJ Mack, he's a guy that floats out to the perimeter just because of his skill set. They need someone that can really be dominant down the paint. And I would not be shocked to see South Carolina starting tomorrow really go after it, take advantage of some of the guys in the portal.
Yeah, portal's open.
And start to bring guys in that can fit that system. I think that's the other thing too. Thank you. It's not just being able to bring players in that are big, that are this and that. It's going to be players that can fit the system. I mean, I've had conversations with multiple people on staff, and that's one thing that it's already a difference from this year in comparison to last year. Last year, it was very difficult It was very difficult to be able to go out there and try to bring some of the talent that you wanted in. Obviously, they did a phenomenal job with it. The difference already happening is that you have coaches, you have parents, you have people reaching out to South Carolina saying, hey, I have someone for you. That wasn't necessarily the case a year ago, but that's what happens when you win games. So, look, it's frustrating. It's frustrating. Bottom line, they didn't have someone to be able to match up with what Oregon had. And I'm talking specifically in the paint. Kuznard, he did his thing. He did his thing. But big play is what really hurt this team multiple times. Saw it against Auburn, and we saw it again today.
Yeah, Mike, absolutely. Auburn, and then, I mean, even with Tennessee a little bit, I think, this reminds me of when you beat Tennessee on the road, right? Tennessee, they almost had that game. It was, I believe, it was on home floor where Dalton Connect went crazy, but they were a big away from winning that game, right? They're big playing well. So you can have a star player play well and, still win the game if you're South Carolina. But the problem was, right, there is a point in this that Oregon's bigs played well, and that's where you really couldn't compete. And then I see some people talking defensively. Yeah, you needed some stops in the post, and when you're running up and down like that, and Oregon had as much of an emphasis on the post as they did, it's really hard to get stops consistently when you're as outgunned as you are. And, South Carolina, your point, Mike, about, needing a dominant big. I think that's what they wanted Josh Gray to kind of be. But he's a great, the guy off the bench in that role. Like, he's fantastic as a six-man big. He's big, he's physical, but just hasn't been able to make the cut as a starter role. And so, I have a feeling, and like you said, the transfer portal is wide open now too. Guys are already, committing, moving, that's all, going as we speak. So I expect them to go get just a big dominant guy that can play, next to Josh Gray. And then you should be set. I mean, go out, get a couple guards as well. I saw there was a comment about replacing Talon Cooper. That's going to be really hard. I agree. And so then, hopefully I would expect Michi Johnson to come back. So we'll see. I mean, Lamont had success in the portal, finding guys this season. So there's a lot of faith to be had in what Lamont can do this offseason. And again, this team did really well after being picked to finish dead last in the SEC. So anything's on the table, right, with Lamont Paris going forward.
You see some of the stats for Oregon, talking about that play in the paint, 30 points for Oregon. And to me, that was the difference. I get it. Jermaine was doing everything, but I really feel like the game changed with how South Carolina struggled to just stop the play, and not just Dante, specifically Dante, but of the bigs. And I felt like in the second half, South Carolina did a little bit better job. It felt like in the first half in particular, they really weren't physical as much as they needed to be able to cause disruptions down in the paint. Felt like they changed it up a little bit in the second half, but offensively, when you're not being able to get those shots to drop, especially in that first half, when you go on that scoring drought for over 7 minutes, with this offense, we've talked about it throughout the course of the year, but especially leading into this game after what we saw against Auburn, when they're not able to come out and be able to play the style that they want to, especially in the first half, and they fall behind, the comparison that we have made, Joe, it's like a team that runs the triple option in football that has to throw the football a lot more in the second half. That's what happened with this team. They had to come out, and even though they were able to cut that lead down because of that 3/4 of the court shot from Cooper heading into the half, they still had to play a faster style of offense than what they wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, nail on the head there, right, Mike? I think when South Carolina wins, they have success by, getting up by a lot and then throwing the car in neutral and, really focusing in on their defense. And they didn't really have the opportunity to do that today. Oregon, again, pushed the pace with their guards. And then when, they slowed things down, they worked it in through their bigs. All of the game when Oregon, when you control the tempo like Oregon did, being able to, work the game through your bigs or, push the pace with your guards, I think you're going to have a lot of success. And, when you're chasing the lead, when a team is doing that, just kind of flipping the pace like that, it makes it really tough. And when South Carolina's bread and butter is, not necessarily slower offense, but putting the car in neutral, slowing it down a little bit more than you would expect. Because, I mean, we've seen the high-flying stuff from Michi Johnson, right? Just pulling up three. We know that's in them. But it's not their bread and butter, right? And to win games, especially in the tournament, you got to Got to go with your bread and butter. And, the Gamecocks, obviously, just not as many points in the paint. I think the turnovers early killed you. And that's really like when this game kind of got out to the gates and off and running a little bit. I mean, you were turning the ball over, couldn't get anything to go on offense. And that really killed you today.
Yeah, just not able to find that rhythm. And as we mentioned before, with just Dante's presence defensively in the paint, you saw South Carolina drive it multiple times, and they had to dish it out. In some of those dishes, led to turnovers. We saw some careless turnovers. I know that there was one by CMB that led to an easy layup on the other end. That was during a time period where I think it was maybe a 6 or an 8-point game in the second half, and then it went the other way. One of those runs where, Oregon had multiple runs on offense. And then on the flip side of it, complete opposite. South Carolina had multiple scoring droughts. I really don't want to get too deep into what South Carolina needs to do from a next season standpoint. But I think with this team, when you look at what they were able to accomplish this year, it's certainly going to grab the attention of more players that are talented out there in the portal, despite the ending of what we saw here today, with South Carolina losing 87-73 to end the season 26-8, tying them with the 2016-17 Final Four team for most wins in a season. Joe, we're going to hit some ads real quick. Tax season's right around the corner.
Yeah, Mike, tax ID is that uncertain feeling you get right before doing your taxes, but you don't have to go through it alone. The tax team at Liberty Tax in Irmo, Lexington, and Columbia will walk you through the process, clear up any confusion, and guarantee you'll get the biggest possible refund or your money back. It's tax time. If you're in a hurry for a refund, call in the tax team at Liberty Tax. They're fast, accurate, and guaranteed. On the other hand, if you think you might be owing Uncle Sam, talk to the Liberty Tax team to make sure you're not paying more than you should owe. They'll find every possible deduction for you. Locally owned and operated, staffed by tax professionals from your neighborhood, open 9 on weekdays and 9 to 5 on Saturdays with multiple service options. Start through the Liberty Tax mobile app or through their desktop portal. Make an appointment or just walk in. Give a call to upload your tax documents. And when you come in, your return will be ready to review and sign. Give them a call on your screen right now. And for those listening, 803-462-5576. Once again, on your screen right now. And for those listening, 803-462-5576 for all of your tax needs this tax season, Mike.
And today's show is also brought to you by our good friend Clint Hammond over at Movement Mortgage. If you're in the process of purchasing a home, trying to find the lowest rate on the market, do exactly what our very own Wes Mitchell, as well as former Gamecocks quarterback and captain Terry Orth did, when both of them were looking for homes. They called Clint. That number, 803-771-6933. Joe, what are you doing?
I put it on. It's all.
All right, so a couple other things I want to hit before we wrap things up on this Gamecock team. You go 7 years without making the NCAA tournament, and you come out, you have the type of performance you had today. And I see it. There you go, SC Scout guy right on cue. This one just hurts, kind of flashbacks that 97 season. South Carolina came to Pittsburgh and came up short in the first round. I think here's what I like, Joe. Here's what I like. This team gets to the tournament. They have an incredible year, tie the record for most wins in a season, picked last, right? All the stuff that we've talked about. And yet, the frustration today is the frustration that you would have for a team that had the type of season that they had. And to me, that's the direction that you need this program to head. Right? You can't just go out there today. They have the type of game to, oh, you know what? Well, they still had a great season. There'll be a time to do that. There'll be a time to do that. Today's not that day. Today's not that day. And that's why seeing the type of reaction from the fan base, I totally get it. And when you hear Lamont talk about it on Sunday, saying, hey, at some point, we want to be measured by how far we go in the tournament, not how many tournaments that we've appeared in. Where South Carolina is at right now, they're not there. They're not there to be able to measure how deep they go. It's about being able to get into the tournament. They accomplished that. They accomplished that this year. Year two, ahead of the game, ahead of where many people expected this team to be. If you said, hey, this team's going to make it to the NIT before the start of the season, I think a lot of people would say, sign me up. but they didn't. They exceeded expectations, and a lot of that had to do with what they were able to get from the transfer portal. It was disappointing not to be able to see some of that production today from some of those guys that have been successful from the portal. I mean, and I'm not talking just from a point standpoint, right? We can pull it back up again, look at some of the stats offensively, whether it be BJ Mack, Michi certainly, Cooper, but defensively, it wasn't there. It wasn't there. It wasn't like they played awful defense. I mean, down the stretch, Oregon was able to run away with it. It looked worse than it really was for the majority of the game, especially, I'd say, through the first half and then the first half of the second half because of South Carolina falling behind from an offensive standpoint. But it just wasn't consistent enough. It wasn't consistent enough, and that's what South Carolina was able to do such a great job of throughout the course of the year, is being able to play defensively consistently. That was just one of the things that really frustrated me today when I watched this team.
Yeah, Mike. I mean, it's really frustrating when you go all the way like that after such a good season, right? There's a lot that you said that I liked. I think, there's plenty of things to be taken from this season. In terms of the transfer portal, if guys fit a role on this team where there is an absent, guy or a guy leaving, I think it's very much, an attractive appeal to come to South Carolina and play for Lamont. The way that he kind of took, Talon Cooper playing the exact style that he wants his point guard to play, plugged him in, and they had a lot of success. That's like, honey to bees, right? Or it should be when you're choosing schools, right? So I think if you're a basketball player in the transfer portal, you're certainly looking at South Carolina based on the success that they've had. And then also shout out to Gamecock Nation too, because, that Colonial Life, filled up very quickly as soon as this team got good. Proved ever more so that South Carolina is a basketball town too, along with a football town and, every other sport town. I mean, golf, take your pick. Columbia, the city of dreams, if you will. But, tough effort today. You're going to learn from this, right? The guys that are coming back next season, they're going to take a lot from it. This team overachieved and, they did their job, right? Picked dead last, finished in the SEC. And, a lot of hungry guys still on this roster that want to come back and have success at a place like this. And, also want to put on for the fans at home. And, the SEC schedule, Mike, as we learned this year, it was a gauntlet, so this team's going to need to bring it, but a couple pieces, have faith in Lamont this offseason, and, hopefully we're sitting here, talking a little bit better with a little bit better results same time next year. So I think there should be all the faith in Coach Paris, the extension, and everything that he's been able to accomplish this season is certainly worth it. And, it gives you every more right to have a lot of hope going into next season.
And that's honestly, it's the right attitude to have when you look at this team, big picture-wise, but it's tough to do that today. And I totally understand the frustration from the fan base because they've been itching. They've been itching to get back to this point. And for the first couple minutes, it was a boxing match. It was back and forth, back and forth. It wasn't the sexiest style of basketball. Not a lot of points, slow pace, a little sloppy on both ends, more so in Oregon's end, but they just weren't able to keep up with Oregon's offense as far as being able to trade those blows. You go about, like I said, over 7 minutes without a field goal. It changed the game. It changed the game. You can't go through those droughts. Not like this. So, yeah, I mean, we can look at when we head into the offseason, we talk about the guys in the portal and what South Carolina is going to be looking at. There'll be a time and place to do it. It's a disappointing way to end what was such a special, magical season, overachieving, doing so much more than so many envisioned what this team being able to accomplish, and obviously being able to do something that hadn't been done in nearly a decade, which is getting back to the NCAA tournament. I think we're going to wrap things up in a little bit. Not much more to say other than that. It was just one of those days. It was just one of those days for South Carolina. You needed more. You weren't able to get it. And on the opposite side, it's going to be a game that people will talk about for many years to come. The Jermaine Kuznar game. The fact that he was able to go out there and drop 40 against his former team today, and a career high for Kuznar. Put up 39 earlier this season for Oregon, which he only was able to do that a couple times in his career. Really has been able to find his shot. at Oregon. Doing some good things, no question, at South Carolina, but he's been able to really do things that he's been asked more of playing for the Ducks. Any final thoughts, Joe, before we wrap things up from Pittsburgh?
Nothing really, Mike. I mean, you're going to take this loss. It's going to be sour to all the guys that are coming back, and you should return a lot of guys. It's baseball season, and the transfer portal is still alive and well as we know it with guys committing. So basketball news cycle isn't quite over yet. Still should be some good news coming for Gamecocks regarding next season. You should hold your head high about this season, regardless of how today ended up. And really, really good showing for a men's team that was kind of dead in the water, right? A quick revival like that, and it's wild to be sitting here after the NCAA tournament thinking with this team going forwards. But here we are, right? Big stepping stone for this squad and this program going forward. And I think Lamont Paris is a perfect guy to do that, right? And so this year was a really, really good indication of hopefully where the program is going. And again, Gamecock fans should certainly be holding their head high regarding the season as a whole. And you have a men's basketball team now. Are you happy? Like it's pretty cool to have buzz around March. So a lot of things to be positive. I mean, I don't have the optimism shades, Mike. I think they're still your place, but pretty good season, and again, unfortunate result today.
I think my biggest takeaway is, and I think Big Red, you say it best, they ran into a buzzsaw with Oregon. This is going to be a game this season in general, but this game combined with what we saw against Auburn is going to be something that heading into the offseason, especially with the transfer portal now, there's going to be something that South Carolina is going to look at and say, hey, we need to be able to find something that can slow down those bigs. I think that's what really stands out to me today. It's not just today. It goes back to last week against Auburn. Goes back to a couple weeks, that first meeting against the Tigers, and being able to identify some of those areas that they're going to need to be able to clean up. They're going to be losing a lot of talented guys. They're going to be losing Cooper. They're going to be losing BJ Mack. And even if Michi's back, you're going to have some good guard play. You're going to have to go out there and you're going to have to find something like that. Now, they were able to do a phenomenal job with it, with Cooper. And we knew with Cooper coming in that he was someone that could really be the facilitator that South Carolina desperately needed, even going back towards the end of the Frank Martin era. So being able to identify that will be important, but being able to bring in some bigs, because that was something that really hurt South Carolina, certainly in the SEC tournament, and again today in the NCAA tournament. If you missed any of our show, head on over to the Gamecock Central YouTube page where you can watch this show and other GC Live shows in its entirety, or head on over to the Gamecock Central Podcast Network for additional shows, including the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour on 107.5 The Game. Well, there was a short trip. It's going to be a long one back to Columbia. I can tell you that, Joe, tomorrow. Be sure to continue to follow Gamecock Central for women's basketball news as they make their run in the NCAA tournament, plus baseball, football. Spring football is underway for the Gamecocks. We'll have plenty of content, as we always do, on Gamecock Central. Appreciate you guys tuning in. He's Intern Joe. I'm Mike Uva, signing out from Pittsburgh. Safe travels back to any Gamecock fans that made the trip out this way.